I'm John Papola, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker Podcast.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Matt Balaker Podcast. Please encourage your friends, your acquaintances, the people you haven't talked to in a few years to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Our guest today is a father, a filmmaker, a serial entrepreneur with excellent teeth. He's an amateur economist, an internet first ballot Hall of Famer, the founder and CEO of Emergent Order. Please welcome John Papola to the podcast. How are you doing, John?
Oh, Matt, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So I'm curious, John, what was your first job after college?
My first job after college, well, there's two answers to that question. My first gig was I was a production assistant on a Pennsylvania Lotto commercial. I graduated from film school, spent that last Jersey Shore summer in Brigantine, New Jersey, where I've gone every year since birth until graduation. I met a producer down there, Mick Shevchek, who, God rest his soul, passed away this past year. But he said, you want to get into movies and television? Well, don't move out to LA. The writer's strike is going on. This is 1999, summer of 99. Come up to New York. I'll get you working on sets. He was a producer at Screen Gems, this grizzled old guy, like first generation. Parents are from the Ukraine. And so he got me on this absolutely brutal 3-day Pennsylvania Lotto commercial in the blazing hot sun in August in PA. And I busted my butt for 3 days. I ended up, being thrown the keys to go pick up the director at the Four Seasons in downtown Philadelphia because they were like, oh, you're from Philly. It's like, well, I was born in Philly, but I don't know the city really from the life of me as far as driving it. But sure enough, I'm driving the director to set from the Four Seasons in downtown Philadelphia. And that was my first gig. And then my first job at as an employee was at MTV Animation. I was in a division of MTV that produced commercials for ad agencies. And it was part of the animation division, which was like a happenstance of the fact that MTV's animation, Beavis and Butthead and Daria, they all were born out of the promos department at MTV. They all started as shorts. And then this like sort of accidental animation team sprung up out of the success of those shorts. And so I was working there, and that was my first gig.
Wow. So the teenage version of me just got all excited when you mentioned Beavis and Butthead. I grew up in San Diego County, and I remember there was an animation festival in La Jolla, and there was probably a 90-second Beavis and Butthead clip from some guy who was apparently a UCSD physics major. And then fast forward a couple years, and it's this hit show on MTV. What was your interaction with the show and the creator?
I didn't get to interact with Mike Judge. I was really kind of part of, I would say, maybe a second and a half wave of people at MTV. Okay. So when I got there, Daria was still on the air. Mm-hmm. Celebrity Deathmatch was still on the air and in production, and they were actually producing both of those shows physically on my offices at 50th and Broadway in New York City. And then the director of do you remember there was one of the MTV's first films called Joe's Apartment about the director of that movie. I actually worked direct. I did PA work for that director at MTV when I was there, and so there was sort of that next wave of people who I was working with at the time.
And is it true that people can be over 25 and work at MTV?
Yes, for sure. But I will say this: you do tend to age out by 50.
Oh, okay, that's twice what I would have guessed.
50, 55. And some of that is just a matter of interest, I think. Mm-hmm. And some of it is taste and corporate culture changes, but I mean, I'll tell you this. So a good friend of mine, great guy named Alan Goodman, him and his longtime business partner, Fred Seibert, were actually like instrumental in the creation of MTV. They were old CBS radio guys. Fred Seibert, Frederator, his animation shop is responsible for a lot of these shorts that have turned into TV shows. Do you remember, Adventure Time on Nickelodeon? Or maybe it was Cartoon Network. Anyway, I saw early cuts of some of these things because of Frederator. But they stuck around through the Viacom universe for years and decades and played a really important role. So you can be an old guard, you can be old school and still be a contributor. I'm definitely an old school guy myself for sure.
Well, that's reassuring, John. And our good friend Eric, it was the Econ Stories Keynes versus Hayek video.
Living high on that cheap credit hog. Don't look for a cure from the hair of the dog. Real savings come first if you want to invest. The market coordinates time with interest. Your focus on spending is pushing on Fred. In the long run, my friend, it's your theory that's dead. That
propelled him to major in economics. Then he later went to law school, where he was a student of Amy Coney Barrett, and now he doesn't practice law. But he had a pretty cool career arc. And around that time when this came out, I was a business student through a USC MBA program. And I remember just being bored out of my mind in one of the econ classes. But then our reward was to play this video. And I can honestly say, I think you've done more for economic education than 94% of the PhD professors in this country. So first off, thank you. But more importantly, John, how did this happen? How did this famous video come to be?
Well, first of all, that warms my heart to such a degree you have no idea. In so many ways, that the story you just shared about the impact of those videos is the reason why we're having this conversation, because I was, I had become a dad. Mm-hmm. It's 2000, my son was born in 2005. So right near the peak of the housing boom. Sure. My wife and I, we bought an apartment. We sold it in 2006. The market was getting crazy. I'm commuting into New York City from Jersey, 4 hours a day back and forth. And I have no formal economics training at all. I had one economics class in high school taught by the football coach.
Okay.
So
home ec?
It was like, the only thing I remember of it, and we made videos for that too, like making crazy videos about monopoly versus oligopoly, or I don't know what. But I was listening to, I actually have to just give my wife credit for just about everything. So I'm a big debate guy. She noticed I was wasting a lot of time like debating like Mac versus PC on the internet in my spare time, like a total nerd.
Yeah, that is pretty nerdy. Yeah.
She's like, Apple's not paying you to be their PR department. Just put your energy into something else. So I started listening to books about history and economics because of what was going on around the world.
Yeah.
Between that and Ron Paul, I got onto this idea of Austrian economics, sort of the free market, what I consider to be genuine economics, the original main line of economic thought. How do people who have plans and purposes in their mind navigate a world of uncertainty and scarcity and arrive at anything like what they want out of life? That to me is what economics is about. That's what economics is actually trying to discover. How do people basically coordinate their plans and purposes in a complex society that has scarcity?
It's usually 7 to 12 people, preferably with Ivy League pedigrees, and they map it out. And then the rest of us dutifully follow that. Is that true?
Right. Yeah. It's all centrally planned.
Okay.
That certainly seems to be the belief of the elite. And then you look at how things actually work. You look at I think back again, I'm reading about this stuff. I'm listening to it on my commute. The whole world's crashing. Mm-hmm. President Obama gets elected. He makes these projections about what this so-called stimulus plan is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to spend $800 billion, which today seems like nothing.
Right.
And it's going to, and we're going to prevent mass unemployment. And they have these projections, and they're completely ridiculous. The actual path of unemployment with the stimulus is worse than the path of the unemployment that they were predicting would happen without it.
Okay.
So they're thinking, oh, we're going to keep unemployment from going above 6%. They spend all this money. It goes, I think, close to 8%, lasts really long. So basically, against the backdrop of that, this inflated boom and bust, and then this let's repeat the things that got us into this in the first place. I reach out to Russ Roberts, who became my go-to podcaster, economist, and basically say, I want to do a video about the boom and bust cycle.
So I want a quick timeout. How did you know to contact Russ Roberts? I mean, I'm glad you did, but I'm curious.
Well, again, I have to thank my wife for this. She showed me that when you want to do something, you just go after the person you want to work with. I had gotten turned on to Russ's podcast because I read the book, The Black Swan, and then was really excited about Nassim Taleb, Googled him, found an Econ Talk episode interview with Nassim Taleb, and then just stayed with Russ, and we became an acolyte. I'm like, Russ is like my econ dad. So Russ and I started to collaborate on this project together. He called me back, which was like the most exciting callback I've ever gotten.
Your nerdiness is fantastic. Like, you were so excited to get this call, but
oh my
please
God.
continue. I just love that.
No, I'm literally working on the Scream Awards.
You're on MTV and you're like, Russ Roberts.
At this point, I'm one of the 2 creative directors at Spike TV in New York City, working in Tribeca. Yeah. I leave a message on Russ Roberts' public voicemail at George Mason University.
Rebecca Romaine, I can't talk to you right now. Russ Roberts is on the phone.
His phone number came up. I had an iPhone at this point, and it's his picture. And I swear I got my heart leapt when I saw his face come up on my screen. And Russ was super skeptical. He was like, well, people call me and they say they want to do things all the time. But over the course of that year, 2009, we developed this idea. It turns into the Fear the Boom and Bust song, which we write together. And then Russ raises a little bit of money, like $15,000.
We wrote together. What was your rap experience like?
So here's a funny thing. I had no rap experience. I like rap, but I'm not like a rap aficionado.
I find that very easy to believe, yes.
So I did a pass. Russ and I had written all these different versions that were not rap. And then one night, I said, I'm going to take a crack at this. We had this joke about it being rap, and I was like, no, I think that's actually a really good idea. Rap's really lyrically dense. It's a great battle format.
Sure.
And I listened to the instrumental. I listened to this song, Remember the Name, and which had this good tempo and had this sort of symphonic beat. And I just thought it felt like a good sound. And then in one sitting, I wrote a draft of the entire lyric. And then I recorded it myself against the track, against the instrumental. And I brought it into Spike the next day. I'm bleary-eyed because I'm up till 5 a.m. doing this. And a lot of my coworkers at Spike were writer producers, but they were also musicians on the side. So I pull a buddy, Luke, into my office. And I'm like, Luke, I want you to listen to this. Give me your honest opinion. And he listens to it and he's like, well, this is actually pretty good. You need a hook, you need a refrain. It's just kind of going on and on and on. And I'm like, oh yeah, right, refrain. Well, how many of those do I need?
Where can I buy a refrain?
Every 4 to 6 measures. I'm like, oh, measures, right. Well, how do what exactly does that mean? He's like, well, every line is like a bar and 4 bars is a measure. So I literally wrote a Dr. Seuss poem to a beat. And then had to get schooled on how to turn that into a song with bridges and changes. And I worked with a producer to help produce original music. And the direction I gave is it needs to be classical, but whimsical. So something like Slim Shady, but with a classical music component, which is what Fear the Boom and Bust, you'll hear that. When you listen to Fear the Boom and Bust, you hear the whimsy of Slim Shady, but with this classical music component. And that was the birth of the song. And then I worked with Russ to refine the lyrics, and then we made the video, and really the rest is history.
Yeah. So you made the video, John. What were you expecting to come of it?
I couldn't have possibly expected what happened. So the first lucky break we got was that Russ was like a great eloquent speaker about economics. And so he was a routine guest on things like NPR's Planet Money podcast at the time, and PBS and stuff like that. And so a producer for PBS NewsHour was doing a segment on John Maynard Keynes, and they decided to bring on Russ because they found out about the rap video we were doing together. And so the producer reaches out to me, and she says,
wasn't his academic literature, it was the rap video.
and it's really kind of interesting because here I think she's thinking like, well, you're just the TV producer guy, so I'll talk to you, and we're simpatico because we're both in the business. And so I'm like, oh yes, yeah, sure. No, this is great. Well, tell you what, we're going to do a recording with our actors, who Lisa cast, Billy and Adam. She found them on MySpace of all things.
Wow.
And Lisa is my wife, and so we ended up being featured in this story on NPR NewsHour in like the winter in December of 2009, and then in the run up to the release, because it was released in end of January 2010, Planet Money did a story about the song, and that story ended up running on All Things Considered, which gets like 12 million listeners in the New York City area alone. So we had this unbelievable, probably impossible to achieve today, like earned media that happened. So I remember the video was released, and I'm in Los Angeles shooting promos for this comedy show on Spike, and I'm refreshing my YouTube, and the video views just keep going. and now it's over 100,000 views, and then it's over 150,000 views, and I'm like trying not to completely just fail at my job because I'm so distracted by this. But it just took off, and in the first week we got 500,000 views and got invited onto all these shows. I mean, like Fear the Boom and Bust appeared above the fold on CNN.com. Like it was right there. You went to CNN.com and there it was.
You don't have to scroll down. Yeah, I mean, I remember at work, I would share it with people, and it was like really the first like viral sensation that was also educational. And I mean, there may have been others, but none that caught my eye. So I'm curious. It wasn't a small budget thing. At least it doesn't appear to be. Like there's very high production quality. Like, who financed it, and what came of that?
Well, the first video actually had a tiny budget. It was only $15,000.
Oh, okay.
So I basically took a week off to line produce it, which meant sitting in my basement for 12 hours, doing everything from making sure we've got enough generators to deal with the cold to hiring the production assistants I pulled every personal favor I had to produce the first video. So it was made like the value is probably 200,000, but the cost was actually like 15 grand. I didn't make a nickel. Nobody made anything. Okay. I paid the crew, I paid the below the line crew, and my actors. And then that was one donor who named Heather, who gave to the Mercatus Center at George Mason, was how she physically did it.
Okay.
So I worked closely with Brian Hooks and Carrie Conco at the Mercatus Center to launch the video. They were instrumental in helping it succeed. And then the second one, Fight of the Century, we worked together and raised money from over 200 individuals to raise the money for Fight of the Century, which, to this day is still maybe my most beautiful piece directing wise. I work with my favorite cinematographer, Pete Conskill, who's just like this absolute artist. And we just had a blast making the boxing sequences and all of that.
And how did the actors parlay this for their careers?
It's funny. They I don't know to what extent it helped their careers. I don't think it hurt their careers.
I sure as hell hope it doesn't hurt. It doesn't harm.
These days, it's like, who knows? They certainly they got a couple good paid gigs out of it because we also had, one of the reasons I live in Austin, Texas, is we were actually invited by Dimensional Fund Advisors, which is a big efficient market hypothesis investment firm here in Austin. They invited us to come down and give like a live presentation with Keynes and Hayek back in 2010, 2011. And we were like, wow, Austin's pretty neat. Maybe we should live here. They've gone on to all kinds of stuff. Adam Lustig's been in a bunch of comedy shows, and they've got sports specials they do together. So they've done well. They're great guys.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing that. But now you've pivoted, and you have a new venture that I'm a fan of. I just got introduced to it. It's called Dad Saves America. What motivated you to start this, John?
Well, in some ways, the work on this started when I was at Spike. I ran a campaign while I was at Spike for 5 years called True Dads, where I went to MTV, then Nickelodeon, which is where I actually met my wife, Lisa, and then Spike. And while I was at Spike, which was the first network for men, I ran this True Dads program where I produced videos that celebrated dads taking an active part in their lives. I'm actually posting all these old commercials on my personal YouTube channel, just so that for people who happen to hear about this stuff and want to check them out. So that's they're going up there this week. But I've been looking around at the world, and my son is now 17, and I've seen some of the struggles his peers have had with anxiety and depression, and this sort of crazed, infantile nature of our politics and our discourse, this self-obsession about identity, which is it's so infantile. It's so internal. It's all me. What should you call me? Well, how does the world going to help me? What are you going to do for me? And as a father, and I just think that is not what you are trying to raise your kids to do. You're trying to raise your kids to get out there and be contributors. And I think the thing that has become clear to me is that dads play this really essential role in the family in helping their kids, especially their sons, but also their daughters, both, to be resilient, to be risk takers, to have empathy, actually, and to understand how to be assertive without being aggressive. And that these qualities are increasingly lacking in American society and in the West. And that in American society in particular, we have this blight, which is that we lead the world in fatherlessness by a large margin. So the rest of the world's fatherlessness rate is something like 9%. And in the US, it's like 35%, pushing 40.
So, wow, like that's a lot to take in. So how's that measured? Obviously biologically, most of us come from fathers, but is that like when a child is born, there's not
between 1 and 3
figure, or just educate me.
Between 1 and 3 and 1 and 4 American children today under the age of 18 are living in a home without a biological step or adoptive father.
Wow. Okay.
So that means, well, let's think about what this means just for a boy. So you're in an environment where you've got a mom who's doing her very best to try to raise you as best she can. And then you are sent to a school where 9 out of the 10 adults you see are women. And the only chance you have to find a male role model is in the coach. And that's only if you happen to be a sports oriented, which not everybody is.
And not all coaches are worthy role models. Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, go ahead.
And the thing is, it hits girls and boys in different ways, but dramatically so. You know, young girls who don't have their father are much more likely to end up being pregnant before wedlock. There's all kinds of other issues that happen for both sexes in different ways. But I think the thing about it for me is we live in this age where the screen has brought national and international politics into our face 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And we individually can't do anything about any of that. We have no agency to act on any of the stuff that rises our blood pressure coming through our screens. But if you're a dad, or a could-be dad, or a would-be dad, or a should-be dad,
mm-hmm.
you actually have this thing you can do in your life that you have control over. You are the actor. You are the agent.
Mm-hmm.
And it can have an enormous impact on the life of another person. And so the message with Dad Saves America is, if you're concerned about the country and you're a man, there's something you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You can be an active, engaged dad.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot there. I mean, you mentioned the importance of, well, just empathy and strength and courage. I guess if you could pick one or two ways, John, that dads can save America, what do you think are the most important?
Well, I think the first is probably that our kids need to develop this twin mindset for success. And that twin mindset is they need to believe they have agency over their lives, that their choices matter, that they're not a victim of circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this victimhood culture that even rewards you for embracing your marginalization. That is utterly toxic. I have never met anyone that
how so? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, think about this. Most things that are worth doing are difficult. And so if you're going to try to take on a difficult task, which is to say, try to take on anything worth doing, what's more empowering? Believing that you can do it, or believing that the chips are stacked against you?
Yeah.
It's that simple. No coach goes into the locker room and says, all right, boys, chips are stacked against us. We're probably going to lose it, and it's not our fault.
Yeah.
That is a speech delivered by no coach ever outside of The Onion. So that's a role that dad plays. Dads do that. Dads deliver that in explicit and implicit ways by our nature. Mm-hmm. When our kids when our kid trips and they skin their knee and their lower lip is starting to quiver, and instead of leaning into that, oh, honey, are you okay? Oh, I'm so sorry. No, dad goes, no, you're good. No problem. Pick it back up. And
shake it off.
And, you know, it's not to say you shouldn't be caring. And it's not that mom and dad play this important role, and the dynamics there are different in every family. But somebody needs to carry that mantle of you can do it, you can overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And dad tends to be the one to play that. The second thing is growth mindset. Am I capable of more than I currently understand? Well, you better believe that if you're going to go out there and try anything that you haven't done before.
Right.
So this belief that if you aren't good at something, that's not your fault, and that you should give up, or it's because of X, Y, and Z. These are very closely related. But it's like, no, everybody sucks. Everything is hard. Nobody knows anything. So what you need to do to get out there in the world is you need to be prepared for the fact that you can grow and improve, and that it's going to be difficult. That's growth mindset. And you know what's funny? I was talking to an economist that runs the Bart Madden Center for Value Creation down in Florida, named Siri. I was telling her about this and the way I think about Dad Saves America, and she says, well, John, you know what? There's actually been a lot of social science on the psychology of entrepreneurship. And those two traits, internal locus of control and growth mindset, are the two most prominent psychological traits in entrepreneurs.
Wow. It's not having a rich parent. That's eye-opening to me.
Oh, if anything, having rich parents is probably a detriment.
Oh, I would, yeah, because you got that hunger, that fight. So what was the relationship you had with your dad?
I am blessed threefold, because my dad was and remains my hero and a huge part of my life, and someone that I draw strength from. I talk to my dad 4 or 5 times a week minimum.
Wow.
My mom as well. I'm a mama's boy. I'm Italian.
Yeah, sure. You're a son. I think that's the default, is being a mama's boy. But
but I also had my grandfather. I had both my grandfathers, but especially my mom's dad, Bill Fadulo, who was just my best friend,
mm-hmm.
and my uncle Bill, who passed away this year, too early. And the three of us, we would go golfing as a foursome. We would go to the beach, and my grandfather taught me how to surf. And my uncle Bill and I would spar about politics, because I was always a little young Republican and he was a Democrat, and he was the chancellor of the Bar Association, and this brilliant guy that I looked up to so much. And so I was 3 times over blessed by having smart, compassionate, caring men in my life that modeled what it means to be a good man.
Wow. And how has fatherhood changed you?
I love that question. So here's the secret. In some ways, this is the kernel of Dad Saves America. It changed everything for me, because I've always been an ambitious guy. So when I got out of film school, I wanted to be Steven Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my bar. Like, everything that wasn't getting me to be Steven Spielberg was like, I'm failing.
Sure.
And then when my son was born, and I had already achieved a certain degree of, like, okay, I'm working at a pretty high level inside of a major network and one of the 5 big media companies in New York City. So by most definitions, I was pretty successful. When my son was born, all of that became a second order priority. And here's the thing that did that nobody ever talks about. It sort of unleashed me, because I realized, hey, I could start a company of my own, and even if it fails, who cares, so long as my boy is happy and healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares if I don't get that directing job? I'm going to throw everything I've got at it. And what's the worst that could happen? They go with the other guy? Like, like, we get in our own ways sometimes, and we let fear and doubt keep us from achieving our potential. And becoming a dad made all of those things that used to be like kind of scary to tackle seem like irrelevant trivialities. It's like,
mm-hmm.
okay, what's the worst that could happen? I go get another job. Okay, fine. What's the worst that could happen? I don't get that gig. We don't make as much money this year. Well, all of that became gravy. It was a kind of, I don't know how to say this in a way that there's a phrase, F you money.
Oh yeah.
Kind of psychic F you money.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the best thing you can do when you negotiate is be prepared to walk away.
Yeah.
And being a dad enabled me to walk away from anything else.
Wow. That's being able to walk away is such an asset. Well, John, I know in entertainment, they say the worst thing is originality. And I believe that. So I'm going to take a page out of Entertainment 101 and take some questions from your video that I enjoyed yesterday. So without further ado, what is your favorite dad joke or shtick that you play with your son?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I haven't.
You wrote it, so
I haven't had these turned on me, actually. You know, gosh, I'm not even sure. I do so many things that my son says are rote
Okay.
That he
Smart kid.
says he calls me Papa, which I love.
That's
He's
adorable.
like you're running script. So I think I repeat myself a lot. And I
Okay.
think that's probably it. I repeat certain phrases and things all the time, and they generate eye rolls, but hopefully they're sticking. That's one.
Oh yeah, eye rolls are better than laughter when it comes to parenting. So, John, what's the most dangerous thing you let your son do?
Oh boy. Well, some might say let him fly to London by himself when he was 10, but there's nothing dangerous about that technically. Certainly the answer is letting him drive a car.
Yes. And you still let him do that?
He does. I'm very proud of him for doing it because his generation increasingly doesn't get their driver's license, and he's out and about. He's independent. He's driving a car. He's got a job. He's cleaning up swampland right now as we speak.
Oh, he's putting me to shame. That's you're my inspiration. So, how have you damaged? And to use your words, John, we mean damage in the most loving way possible. Your son.
I'm going to share a really horrible, embarrassing story. I'm a super nerd. I got this drone. It was the first drone we ever got. And I was so excited about it. It arrived at home. I took it outside and I'm learning how to fly it. And I think I got the handle of it. And so I said, okay, Matteo, I want you to run down the street and I'm going to have the drone follow you. And it'll be the super awesome tracking shot, low to the ground. And it's looking amazing. And then I'm like, all right, Matteo, keep running. And I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to boom up, let it fly up. So it'll like fly over top of his head. And what I didn't realize was flying higher meant spinning faster, which also meant it went forward faster.
Okay.
So I ended up flying the drone into the back of my son. And it crashes into his back and it tears up his shirt. And he takes to the ground screaming. He's like, what the hell? What did you do to me? And the worst part of it all is I'm trying to hold back the schadenfreude laughter the entire time. So that was definitely not a Father of the Year moment, but it was definitely like a injure your son. He lived, he survived, you know.
That's well. This relates to that. If you could have one parenting do-over, what would it be?
Oh, it might be that one. I don't know. I don't have a lot of regrets.
Well,
I don't have a lot of regrets.
that's nice.
I think it probably would be that one, actually. It was fairly irresponsible.
Yeah, but if that's your biggest, I think you should pat yourself on the back. So what is the biggest lesson you learned from your father?
Oh, there's so many, but my dad's a surgeon. And so the far and away, the biggest thing I learned from my dad is get the job done right. You know, he was a measure thrice, cut once guy.
Mm-hmm.
And when my dad gives instructions for where to drive, he tells you when to switch lanes. That's the kind of instruction.
Wow.
So, and I would say this to answer your earlier question about dad things, and I get this from my dad too. I can be lecturous.
I can see that. Yeah. I can see
And you know, this is like a kind of reverse answer to multiple questions. I should probably be less lecturous than I am because it doesn't really work. But it is what it is.
Hey, lecture on, John. How would you hope that your son answered that question? Like, what if I asked him, what's the most important lesson John has taught you? What would you want him to say? Not what would he say? What would you want him to say?
He could do worse than get the job done right. I mean, I'd like to say always act with honesty and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's more important than getting the job done right. But right below that is get the job done right. You know, everybody takes shortcuts. You know, it's like, you know, I don't know how I was very lucky to, you know, oh, okay, I'm working at a restaurant. okay, you're going to clean that old grill and griddle out back. I got my arm up to my elbow in the grease of the griddle. And you know what? For whatever reason, it's probably a little bit of OCD. I would stay at it until every piece of grease was done. And I swear that is the key to success. You will shine, you will prosper, you will thrive, you will move up whatever ladder it is you're trying to move up if you embrace this being competent and getting the job done right, because you will stand out from 99.9% of everybody else.
So the tip to be in the 1% is elbow grease. I like that.
Literally.
So if you had one day to relive with your father, what would it be?
I'm very fortunate. My dad is young. He was 23 when I was born, which I also recommend. I was 28 when Mateo was born. Gosh, I am fortunate. I can pick just about any day on the Brigantine Beach, running around with my dad and relive that and be in heaven. And luckily I get to. So I'm going to keep doing that as long as I can.
I think that's a good plan. And now, thank you. Those were questions by and large that you wrote. So thank you for letting me lift them without your permission and then just springing them upon you. But we're wrapping up, and you have a lot more great things to do in the future, but taking some time now to look back, what do you know now, John, that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career?
I know the answer to this. If you're going to build a team, especially if you're going to build a company, there is nothing more important than values alignment. You want the people that you surround yourself with and that who work for you and with you and that you serve as a leader, because leadership is fundamentally a service role, to be on board. And that doesn't mean you can't have intellectual diversity and you can't and shouldn't welcome challenges. But, you know, people talk about the team of rivals of Abraham Lincoln. They all were invested in Lincoln's success. There wasn't anybody that fundamentally didn't want Lincoln to succeed among his team of rivals. It was a question of, we all want the same ends and we have different ideas about the means. Mm-hmm. You can't build a great team unless everyone is on board about the ends. And that is something that has taken me a long time to learn. But I'm really proud of the team we have at Emergent Order Foundation now, and everybody's super pumped. And, you know, I'm a late worker, but it's rare that I'm the last one to leave. Mm-hmm. And that speaks volumes, and it's been hard-won lessons.
Sure. So with that in mind, you know, what is the mission or the focus of Emergent Order?
So, you know, in 2021, we sort of launched a new Emergent Order. The old Emergent Order still exists as a for-profit agency that services clients, and we're doing a great project with Independent Institute right now called LoveGov Season 3. But the new Emergent Order Foundation, is a studio dedicated to using heroic storytelling that embodies classical virtues to celebrate American freedom. And that's what Dad Saves America is. Dad Saves America is a project of Emergent Order Foundation. It's a nonprofit. We have great donors and partners who are supporting our work. We're always looking for more. And I believe that the classical virtues that underpin the West are the way that you succeed, that they give you the tools for success. And the way we transmit those virtues is through heroic storytelling, through that hero's journey of the individual who overcomes the odds, who embraces their agency, who takes out on that journey to try to make the world a better place and slay dragons and come back a changed person. And that's the moral transmission mechanism we use to inculcate those ideas. And that's what Emergent Order Foundation exists to do. We're a studio trying to do that across a wide range of things. So we've got Dad Saves America. We've got some film and TV projects we're developing. We've got other stuff in the works, but that's what we're all about.
Stay tuned, America. And lastly, John, what are you most optimistic about
I am optimistic about the path of humanity in general. I'm a rational optimist. So I think we have a lot of short-term headwinds, and we're regressing on a couple fronts. We're regressing on energy and food. We're regressing on individual liberty in a lot of ways. But I think long-term, you can't look at the data and not be an optimist. Humanity has cut global poverty from 40% at the turn of the century, or I should say, just 40 years ago, to below 9% today, even though it's upticking right now because of all the idiocy going on by our elites. But that's a blip. Putin and inflation and all of this stuff that's going on, that basically the knuckleheads that think they run the world are tripping over themselves. It's like they take turns tying each other's shoelaces together. They meet in Davos to tie each other's shoelaces together and then go running down the hallway like a bunch of clowns. Meanwhile, you just get out of our way. That the average person armed with their own intellect and knowledge can change the world. And I think that's still going to be that's the horse to bet on long term.
Well, I'm betting on that horse, John. So for people out there who want to learn more about you, maybe they have surplus cash that they want to send your way, where can these folks go?
Well, if visit dadssavesamerica.com, where you'll see the videos. They're also available on the YouTube channel, but you can make nonprofit tax-deductible donations at dadsavesamerica.com, or you can go to our organization's website, eo.foundation, no www, no .com, just eo.foundation, and check out our work, make a donation, become a member of the community that's helping us do what we do.
Do what he said, people. He's making the world a better place. John Papola, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Matt, it's been a blast. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker Podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.